About how many parents do we have on now?
I think we have a few, like about 3 or 4, maybe.
Okay, okay. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Paige Shepley, and I am a certified Social Security benefits counselor. And I started that process in 2010. And it takes approximately about a year to get certified. So I've been an active benefits counselor for about 10 years. And I'm a vendor for Doors. So the vast majority of the people I work with are Doors clients, because benefits counseling is a mandatory service that Doors provides to all their clients who get disability benefits. And okay,
There you go.
everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so primarily I work with Doors clients, and we work with beneficiaries throughout their whole Doors process from the beginning to the end when they get a job. So so today's presentation is going to just be an overview of the different types of Social Security benefits, medical benefits that come with it. So it's kind of like a Social Security 101 type training. All right, let me get started. Okay, so there are several different types of Social Security benefits. And a lot of it's surprising how many people don't even know what benefit they have. And a lot of people, I'll ask them and they say they have SSA, and that stands for Social Security Administration. So then I have to, that's not actually a benefit, but Social Security doesn't necessarily do a really good job of explaining what all these different benefits are. So there are two main categories of benefits. There are Title II benefits, which are based off of work history, whether it's an individual's work history or a parent's work history, or in some cases a spouse. And there's also SSI. SSI is a welfare benefit. That's for people who are either disabled and haven't worked long enough to qualify for SSDI, or it's also for people older than 65 who don't qualify for Social Security benefits. So we have SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance, and that is based off of the individual's work record. So, especially for, younger people, if they're 18 when they're applying, there's a good chance they're not going to be getting SSDI benefits. Another common benefit is disabled adult child benefits, or DAC benefits for short. And they're also known as childhood disability benefits. Now, those are based off of a parent's work record, and you have to be at least 18 to get them, but you have to be disabled before the age of 22. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about that. One benefit that you probably won't see very often is there are benefits for older people who have been widowed. It's a disabled widow or widower's benefit, and that's paid to a disabled widow or widower who is at least 50 and their spouse has passed away. But primarily, you're going to see SSDI, disabled adult child benefits, or SSI, or a combination of more than one. You can actually have all three, just depending on the, how it works out financially. So as I said, SSI is not actually a Social Security benefit. It is administered by Social Security, but it is not a Social Security benefit. It's welfare. So currently, the maximum SSI benefit you can get is $794. And SSI must be used for food and shelter costs. And if there's anything left over after food and shelter costs are paid for, then that can go to other things like other needs, clothing, things like that. But Social Security will actually penalize you if you do not notify them that you're paying for food and shelter costs, or if your children aren't. So this happens a lot. I see especially a lot of 18, 19-year-olds. They're still living with their parents, and they're getting a reduced benefit. Usually it's reduced by a third. So that comes to about $530 approximately in 2021. And this is very easy to fix. What happens, and when somebody first becomes eligible for SSI, you go to a meeting with them, and if the parents are rep payee, the parents are there too. So they'll ask, are you paying rent? And they're just getting approved. So most parents will say, well, no, it doesn't have any money. But that by saying that, if you have a claims rep who, some claims rep will kind of help you out and say, are you sure you're not charging rent? Are you positive? Because they're trying to kind of get you to get the full benefit. But you can even technically, if an adult child is living with their parents, they could even, if they've been charging rent, they could take it from the back payment, if they were charging rent for a while. But what you have to say is, when they're interviewing you, I charge, my child is a renter in my home, and I charge him, say, $400 a month. And they'll ask you that they want it to be fair market value. So frequently they'll say, well, what would you charge a stranger who lived in your house? And if you say 600, then your child's still going to get a reduced benefit. Because Social Security looks at it as somebody else is assisting with their food and shelter costs. So they'll ask you, does your child buy their food and prepare it on their own? If you say no, I buy my child's food, that'll be a reduction as well. So it's just really important to make sure that you always report to Social Security for SSI that the majority of the money is going to food and shelter costs. And that's, like I said, that's very easy to fix. I think 2 days ago, I called with a client. We called the local office. Her son had been paying rent. She just didn't know to report it. So we got it switched in 10 minutes. And, and either next month or the month after that, he's going to get his full benefit. So that was a huge help for the family. Now with SSI, there is an asset limit of $2,000 or $3,000 for a married couple. And if two SSI recipients get married, they get a reduced combined benefit. And currently that's $1,191 a month, as opposed to two people getting $794 each. So that has a lot to do with why the majority of people on SSI aren't married. I think I looked it up and it was less than 25%. And this is a big reduction. So, it makes financial sense for most people to not get married. Now, if an SSI recipient marries somebody who has income other than SSI, like if they're working, for example, Social Security will use a calculation called spouse-to-spouse deeming, and that will help them determine how much, if any, SSI a person can receive. So that can easily result in the loss of SSI benefits and medical assistance as well too. So that's, if I have a client who's engaged, I always have that conversation with them, so they're educated on what they need to do with regards to reporting if they get married to Social Security. Now, in Maryland, with SSI, Medicaid comes automatically if you're approved for SSI. It's not every state has that, but fortunately Maryland does. So in Maryland, Medicaid and medical assistance are used interchangeably. They both mean the same thing. And so for SSI, you have to pick a managed care organization, or they'll assign one to you. And the managed care program is administered by a program called Health Choice. So when somebody first becomes entitled to medical assistance, they'll get a packet, they'll get information on all the different plans, and each plan offers optional benefits. So it's important to really look at like dental benefits, vision, things like that. So it's always a good idea to check that. And the MCOs can be switched once a year based on when somebody first became eligible for Medicaid. And every year the benefits can change slightly. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you're reviewing. They give you a chart, an MCO chart with all the different programs, the service areas, and the optional benefits. So, that's something that's really important to check. And a lot of doctors may participate with Medicaid, but they only may work with certain managed care organizations. So it's also really important to make sure that your medical providers or your children's medical providers take the MCO that you're signing up for. So that can sometimes be a little tricky, but if you know that in advance and contact the doctors, you can pick the best plan that for you or your children. Now, disabled adult child benefits, that is a benefit that many SSI recipients will change over to at some point in their life. SSI is the benefit of last resort. It's welfare. So if you are entitled to any type of Title II benefit, by law, Social Security has to switch you to that. When a parent either retires, if they get on SSDI themselves, or if they pass away, then Social Security has to make a determination of how much of a disabled adult child benefit did I get muted?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
You're
Yeah, that was me. Sorry about that.
Oh, I didn't think I did it.
No, sorry, go on.
Okay.
My mistake.
And in many cases, the disabled adult child benefit can be a lot higher than SSI. So if the parent is still alive, the benefit will be 50% of what their parents get. So if their parents get $2,000 a month in retirement benefits, the child is going to get $1,000 a month. Now, if there's more than one child getting disability benefits, that gets split up. But just to make it easy, we're just talking about one child. Now, if a parent passes away, the amount will increase to 75% of what the parent's Social Security benefit was. Like I said, this is an automatic thing. And Social Security has, they have no choice. I've had clients who say, I want to stay on SSI, and you just can't. So SSI is the most expensive benefit for Social Security to pay because it is strictly funded by the taxpayers, not like Social Security, which is funded by, your taxes. Oh. Sorry, I'm a little, okay, here we go. But one great thing about if you switch from SSI to disabled adult child benefits, by law, the beneficiary can keep their Medicaid eligibility as a former SSI recipient. So, but for the fact that they qualified for the disabled adult child benefit, if they hadn't, they would still be on SSI. So they keep the medical assistance as a former SSI recipient, which is really, really helpful. Especially if you have a child on a waiver, a Medicaid waiver, you don't have to worry about losing that. Now they would also get Medicare, but Medicare would be primary and Medicaid would be the secondary insurance. But there is still, since the Medicaid is for people who were former SSI recipients, like the $2,000 asset limit for SSI still applies to keep the medical assistance. So, you'd want to plan ahead, and, if you thought, your child was going to have more money, you might want to open an ABLE account or, something to that effect. So Social Security won't look at any income over $2,000, because keeping the medical assistance for many people is crucial, especially if they've got a waiver. That's not something that you want to lose. Now, for people who do have Medicare and medical assistance, they will lose the MCO and the optional services, such as the dental and vision coverage. However, I did want to mention that Maryland has been doing a pilot project for Healthy Smiles for adult Medicare and Medicaid recipients. So that's the dental coverage that children on medical assistance get. So this has been, I'm not sure if they've completed the pilot project, but I anticipate this is going to be permanent. So that was always a big issue, with getting Medicare, losing the dental coverage, the vision coverage. So, with the Healthy Smiles, that is a big help for people in this situation. And that can be SSI and SSDI and SSI, or DAC benefits and SSI. So it's still the same. You get the Medicare, that's primary, and Medicaid is secondary. Having a little trouble switching. Okay. Now, one of the biggest differences between disabled adult child benefits and SSDI benefits is that in most cases, if somebody on DAC benefits gets married, they're going to lose their benefits unless they marry another Title II beneficiary. So if they marry somebody who's also a disabled adult child recipient or an SSDI recipient, that's the only case, that's the only situation where they can keep their benefits. And that does not include, if you married somebody on SSI, you would still lose your disabled adult child benefits. So that's always something, if somebody is engaged or thinking about it, I always have that conversation, because you have to plan, that can be a big financial hit, losing that. But in many cases, Social Security will periodically do a work review if somebody's been working, and they'll determine that, you've earned enough work credits to get SSDI on your own. So but Social Security is often very behind on doing these work reviews. Like they might determine 3 years later, oh yeah, in 2019 or 18, you were eligible for SSDI. So we're just making it retroactive. So in situations like this, if there's been some employment, it's always good to try to apply for SSDI, just to see if you can keep, at least some of your benefits. Okay. Oops. No way. Okay. So SSDI benefits, those are based off of the beneficiary's work record before they apply for disability benefits. And in most cases, you have to have worked 5 out of the last 10 years to qualify for SSDI. So, or you can also look at it as 20 out of 40 quarters of coverage. So Social Security uses work credits or quarters of coverage. And the more you have, the more you work over time, the higher your benefit is going to be. So this is how, they, by earning the work credits, that's how you qualify for SSDI. So, and you can earn a maximum of 4 work credits per year. They don't have to be per each quarter. You can earn all 4 work credits in the first month you work. So in 2021, 1 quarter of coverage, if you earn $1,470, you've earned 1 quarter of coverage. So it can just take a few months or it can take the whole year. But there is a rule for people under 31. So this is how a lot of, if somebody who's 18, 19 works for a year and a half and then applies for disability, in many cases, they won't get SSI, they'll get SSDI. Because the younger you are, the fewer work credits you need. You can qualify with as few as 6 quarters of coverage. So that could technically be, you could technically work for a year and 1 month and have enough work credits to qualify for SSDI. And with, for people who are on SSI, because it's the benefit of last resort, Social Security, if you're working, Social Security will, change, your benefits will at some point change to SSDI. Now, depending on how much you work, it could be a partial SSDI benefit, and then you would still get SSI to make up the difference. But, sooner or later, they will get to that. And, over time, the SSDI will get higher and the SSI will get lower. So that's, and that's a good thing, especially if, for people who want to work their way off of benefits at some point, the longer you work, and the more you earn, when you reach retirement age, the higher your benefits are going to be. So, if people with disabilities can work, even if it's just part-time, that's always going to help them in the future. Now, in terms of when you apply for SSDI, once you're approved, there's a 5-month waiting period from the date that Social Security considers your disability onset to the date of entitlement. And depending on how long it takes to get approved, many people could get a very substantial back payment, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And with SSDI, there is no asset limit, and marriage will not affect SSDI entitlement. Now, assets can affect other benefits like Medicare savings programs, which we'll get to that in a little bit. But, you can have a $10 million in the bank and you're still going to get your SSDI check every month. So the only thing they care about is earned income. They do not look at any unearned income. And that's, definitely not the case for SSI and, medical assistance. So with Medicare, Medicare does begin, you have to be entitled to SSDI for 24 months before Medicare benefits begin. But in many cases, especially if it takes more than 1 attempt to qualify, if it took you 2 years from the time you first applied to the time you get approved, you're going to get your Medicare almost immediately. But whatever, but if you get approved on your first attempt and it takes you, say, 5 months to get approved, you are going to have a waiting period for Medicare. Now, through the Affordable Care Act, and since Maryland participates in the Medicaid expansion, a lot of Medicare beneficiaries have been able to get medical assistance through the Affordable Care Act if they meet the income guidelines. So that's 138% of the federal poverty level. And in 2021, this is $17,744 a year. And that comes to about $1,481 a month. So that's been a lifesaver for so many people. Before you just kind of, paid out of pocket or didn't get treatment or, found a free clinic. So this has really been an enormous help for a lot of people. But however, it is the law that once your Medicare eligibility begins, you can no longer keep the medical assistance through the Affordable Care Act. And Medicare does consist of, there are several parts to Medicare. Part A, sorry about that. So Part A is the hospital coverage. And for most people, there's no premium for that. Part B is the medical coverage, and Part D is the prescription coverage. So the Part B premium, sometimes will increase slightly, increased a couple dollars from last year. So it's currently $148.50 for most people. And Medicare Part D plans are actually, the majority of them are very inexpensive. You can get a very solid plan for $30, $40 a month. So this is all stuff, if you have a child or a client who is getting, who's about ready to become eligible for Medicare, they get a welcome to Medicare packet 3 months before their Medicare starts. And it's really important to go through that information. You want to pick a prescription drug plan that covers all the medications that you take and that is affordable. And there are also there's some Medicare savings programs that can assist with paying for Medicare costs, because Medicare can be very expensive if you don't qualify for any assistance. And there's also some people get a Medicare Part C plan. So that's the Medicare, also known as a Medicare Advantage plan. And there's Medigap plans. The majority of people on disability, usually, especially if they have Medicaid, they usually just have original Medicare, the Medicare Part A and Part B, and also the Part D. But there are some affordable Part C plans that may cover some dental coverage, vision, some other services. Each plan is different. So it's not a bad idea, because if your income is low enough, there are some plans that don't cost anything out of pocket. But what I recommend for any questions about Medicare or Medicaid coverage, what your options are, it's really a good idea to contact a SHIP counselor, and that stands for State Health Insurance Program. And every county in every state has a SHIP office, and SHIP counselors really, really know all the ins and outs of Medicare, Medicaid, and the different assistance programs. So I did give you just the number for, I'm not sure where everybody lives, but I gave the Baltimore County, SHIP website and phone number, but it's easy to look up for any county. And I've called them on more than one occasion for advice. So they're very helpful, because you really want to be careful with Medicare. If you don't take Medicare, when you're first entitled to it, um, you get penalized unless you have what Social Security and Medicare consider to be creditable coverage. So if you have other insurance, you can decline Medicare Part B and Part D, but if you don't have other coverage, you incur a penalty for each year that you don't take Medicare. And that can get quite expensive depending, I had one client who, uh, 20 years she had declined Medicare because she thought she couldn't afford it. And her, it was going to be astronomical, but we were able to get her medical assistance, which, if you have medical assistance, you don't incur that penalty. So it's really important, if your children qualify for Medicare, that you really look at that packet and, read everything and make sure you're making the best decision. Now, there are some programs that will help pay for Medicare costs. They are known as either, usually Medicare savings programs, what Social Security calls it. So they're based on income. So however much your Social Security check is, and if you have earned income as well, depending on how much income you have, that depends on which program you qualify for. So the best one is QMB, or Qualified Medicare Beneficiary. That pays your Medicare Part B premiums, co-pays, co-insurance, and deductibles. So it pays for everything. And all these programs are administered by the state of Maryland's Medical Assistance Program. So in 2021, the income limit for QMB is $1,084 a month, or $1,457 for a married couple. And, there's an asset limit too of $7,860 for an individual. Now there's also another program called SLIMB, or Specified Low Income Medicare Beneficiary. So that is for people with higher incomes, but that only pays the Part B premium. So all the other costs are not covered. Now the income limit for that is higher. It's $1,284 for an individual, and $1,744 for a married couple. And the asset limits are the same as QMB. So it's you're when you become eligible for Medicare, they are supposed to screen you for these programs and let you enroll you, and let you know that you're eligible. That doesn't always happen. So, it's a good idea to check and make sure you're getting enrolled if you're eligible, if your children are eligible, that they're getting all the help that they're eligible for. So, in many cases, you just don't want to assume that the state is doing its job. Okay, so there's one other program that's called QI. I know these have really weird names, but this is qualifying individual. And the benefits, it's the same as SLIMB, but it has a higher income limit, and there are a limited number of slots, and you have to reapply every year. So that income limit is $1,496 for an individual. So that's significantly higher. And the asset limits are still the same as for QMB and SLIMB. But if anybody is enrolled in any of these programs or medical assistance, they also qualify for extra help from Social Security, which helps with the Part D premiums and the co-pays. So most people on extra help don't have to pay anything for their premium. And the co-pays, the maximum co-pay currently for generic medication is $3.70 and $9.20 for brand name medications. And in many cases, they're even lower than that. There are a few different factors that come into play, but that's the absolute highest. So, and you also, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, the donut hole with Medicare, which is supposed to have been closed by 2020 through the Affordable Care Act. But, that's a catastrophic period where if your prescriptions go over a certain amount of money, then you have to pay for almost all of them for a period until you reach catastrophic level. And then, the premiums, the copays will go back to normal. But with extra help, you don't ever have to worry about anything like that. So, this is, and these numbers I gave you for the medication, these are the absolute highest. So it would never be higher than that. And currently in Maryland in 2021, Extra Help will pay up to $32.30 towards Part D premiums. And there are many premiums or many plans that are under that amount. There are some plans that are about $100, but all you need is a plan that covers the medications that you take. So if it's a $25 plan, there's no reason to go with a $100 plan if it covers the same thing. So, you can go on Medicare's website, put the medications you take in, and it'll give you all the programs in your area from least expensive to most expensive. So it's the best plans all the way down to the worst plans. And you just pick the best plan, that covers all the meds and that's cheapest. And, you can sign up right there online for Part D. So Extra Help does have some slightly higher income limits. So, for an individual, you can, your income can be $19,320, and you can still qualify for Extra Help. And the resource limits are also a little higher, so $14,790 for an individual. Now there is, this is probably something most of you aren't going to, especially for the parents, if your children have Medicaid, this isn't, this is kind of a program for people who have higher income and, earn a little too much for Extra Help. Maryland does have a program. It's called the Maryland Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program, although it's not just for seniors, it's for anybody who gets Medicare. So you can have, your income can be up to 300% of the federal poverty level, and you can still get some assistance with your Medicare premium and some of the costs. So I just gave you their website. I probably do maybe only like 3 or 4 applications for this a year. So, it's helpful, but if I can get somebody on medical assistance, I'd much rather do that. So, this is just an option if anyone would ever need it. And okay, so I wanted to talk about, now the benefits can be confusing, especially if you get more than one, where your child gets more than one, which is very common. If you get a check on the first and a check on the third, or direct deposit on the first and on the third, then that means you're getting a Title II benefit and an SSI benefit. If your Title II benefit, your SSDI benefit, or your disabled adult child benefit is under the current federal rate of SSI, then you can get SSI to make up the difference. So I just gave you an example here. So let's say Mary gets $500 in SSDI. So as long as she's paying for food and shelter costs, she can also receive $314 in addition through SSI, and she would get medical assistance too. So that would bring her total benefit amount up to $814. And that's $20 higher than the SSI benefit, just because SSI doesn't count the first $20 of any other income you get. That it's very common though. I have many clients who, just worked a little bit, didn't make a whole lot of money, and, they're getting SSI to make up the difference. So that's something that you see quite a lot. But the long, if somebody starts working over time, their SSDI benefits going to increase and their SSI is going to decrease. So in this situation, Mary would receive both Medicare and Medicaid, and she would also not be eligible for a managed care organization. If you have Medicare by law and medical assistance, you just get the red and white medical assistance card. That's known as fee for service. So you don't get the managed care and the optional coverage. So in terms of seeing, a lot of people ask me, well, how am I supposed to find doctors and, who take both? And you just want to say, if you're looking for a new doctor for your child, you just want to say, do you take Medicare and medical assistance together? And if they do, you're not going to have to pay anything out of pocket. But if a doctor doesn't take Medicaid and they only take Medicare, then you're still going to be responsible for the out-of-pocket costs, or your child is. So it's always best to do the research on that. Now, I wanted to just give you some benefits counseling resources. DOORS is, the primary way that the vast majority of beneficiaries in Maryland get benefits counseling. That is a required service for all DOORS clients. It's one of the first services they get. And DOORS has several phases of benefits counseling. So we work with our clients throughout the whole process, from when they start to after they get a job, throughout their case closure. Now, Social Security publishes, it's called the Red Book, every year, and that has information on all the different, gives you information, basic information about the different benefits and the work incentives that Social Security offers to encourage people to go back to work. That is another training I do. There would not have been enough time to do, training on, what happens when people on disability go back to work, what the different work incentives are. But that is very complicated. There's a lot of information to know. Social Security is not very helpful with providing people with information. They expect you to know, and if you make a mistake, it's your fault. They might have sent you this information, maybe your child became eligible 10 years ago and they sent you some pamphlets, and they expect you to remember all that information from however long ago. So I can't stress how important it is to have a discussion, ideally with a benefits counselor, to avoid, I've seen clients, I think the highest I've seen is $100,000 overpayment. Social Security didn't catch it. The client wasn't reporting, and it just took forever. But that can happen, and $30,000, $40,000 overpayments are not uncommon. Even if Social Security makes a mistake, and if they should cut benefits off and they don't, they will say to you, well, you should have known that you weren't supposed to get these benefits, so you should have known you need to pay us back. So it's really, really important to, get some advice, ideally before your child or your client starts working, to make sure that there aren't any issues with Social Security, because it's very easy, to make mistakes if you don't know the rules. Now, there is what's called a WIPA project. That stands for Work Incentives, Planning, and Assistance. And that does offer free benefits counseling. that they get a grant from Social Security to provide that. Maryland's WIPA project is called Maryland Work Incentives Network. And I did give you the website. Now, I don't know a tremendous about WIPA because I've never worked under it. I do not know how comprehensive it is. I think a lot of it is done over the phone. From what I've heard, there can sometimes be a long wait for services, but this is certainly an option to go through them if you're not working with doors, or if your child's not working with doors, because any way you can get some benefits counseling, you should take it. So this would be a free alternative to, if you're not a doors client, or if your child's not a doors client. But the most important thing is to get it from somewhere. Don't just, call Social Security and say my child's working, and they say, okay, and that's the end of it. It's a process. So you really want to make sure what you need to do, because a lot of people will get an overpayment and get discouraged, and they'll say, I tried working, it blew up in my face. Why should I ever do it again? So, and that's not what we want to happen. So, I'm even happy, to answer questions, even if somebody's not a doors client, if you had any questions, you wanted to, Alexandros could get in touch with me, and, I could, have a conversation, just give you some advice, point you in the right direction. But, going on your own is not recommended. This is very complicated. It's my manual is 1,000 pages easily. And I break this down to the most basic information because it is completely overwhelming. So, this is just very, it can get incredibly detailed, especially when employment is involved. And there are also a lot of work incentives, that Social Security offers to encourage people to work. So, they do want beneficiaries to work. They just don't do a great job supporting them. So that's why they have CWICs, which is what I am, and that stands for Community Work Incentives Coordinator. So even Social Security knows that you're not going to be able to call them and have somebody talk to you for 2 hours and explain, go over in great detail and write a benefits analysis for you and walk you through it. So that's why they have benefits counselors to educate people on what they need to do and to break it down in layman's terms. Sometimes if you call Social Security, they'll either give you too little information, or they will speak in what sounds like another language. It doesn't, they'll use all kinds of acronyms. It doesn't make any sense. So, that's not the best way to get the information that you need. And that is it. And so we still have, it's a little bit before 7. I was hoping to get through it a little quicker, but so we still have about a half hour for questions.
Yeah, I'm going to go through a lot were put into the chat, so I'll just go through those in order as they came up. First off, thank you, Paige.
I can't see is there any way I can see the chat?
You should be able to first, if you want to stop sharing your screen, you can do that. And then if you go to the menu at the bottom, you'll see there's a chat. So the first one I saw is from Caitlin.
Okay.
Caitlin was asking, how do you switch that? Do you just call Social Security to report the changes? I think she was referring to when people weren't claiming food and shelter or paying for food and shelter. And you wanted to let them know, like, oh, I am using this to pay for that. Is that something you just call Social Security for?
So that's how you should at least start. Now, it all depends on who you talk to. The claims rep I talked to a couple days ago, she just, she said, how much is your son paying? Said $400. What would you charge a stranger? $400. Is he paying for his own food? Yes. Does he buy his own food separately? Yes. That was pretty much it. Now, if they start it, if you own a home, you want your adult child to be a renter in your home. So that means he pays a flat amount to rent a room. He or she does not pay the utility bills, cable bills. So if they start asking, what is your mortgage? What are your utility bills? Then you got to stop them and say, no, 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 no. He or she is not paying a third of the household expenses or however many people in your family. You want to be very clear. They are renting a room, and this is what I charge them. And Social Security wants it to be fair market value. So you've got to say, if you say you would charge a stranger $600, you're still providing assistance towards their food, their shelter costs. So they're still going to get a reduced benefit. I have created a lease, like a room rental lease for SSI with all the information that they need and written the way they want it. So if, occasionally you might get somebody who says, well, can you send us some documentation? So I'll have them send the lease. A lot of people will just take your word for it. So it really just depends on who you call, who answers the phone, how much information they need. Now, generally what they won't do, which is unfortunate, I find out for a lot of people who are getting a reduced benefit amount, their child's been paying rent for a year and they just didn't know that they needed to report it. I've never seen Social Security go back and refund them all that money. They just typically go forward.
Gotcha.
But it's better than nothing. But it should really be, it shouldn't be a complicated process, but it is best to do it with a benefits counselor if you can. Because I always kind of have a conversation like, don't say this, or, you need to phrase it in this way, or they start talking about mortgage, you got to stop them.
Gotcha.
Because, you really have to say things exactly the way they want it, or you might not end up any better.
Okay. The Gellers were asking, how many hours do you need to work per work credit? Is there a formula?
No, I mean, if you earned, what was it, 1,400 for the work credit, if you earn that in 1 hour, you've earned your work credit.
Okay.
Is that what they were asking? Yeah, so it's not about the hours, it's about, if your hourly is $1,400 an hour, then you've earned your work credit.
Gotcha.
So in terms of a formula, when Social Security releases usually in December or so, they release the next year's COLA, cost of living adjustment, and they tell you what the raise is going to be, how much SSI is going to be. So that number, the work credit amount is included in that too. It changes slightly. It goes up a little bit every year, not too much though.
Okay.
I know we've got one from Caitlin.
Yeah, sorry, I asked a lot of questions.
That's
No,
okay.
that's what we're here for.
I want questions, please. So.
I can try to explain it. My question was trying to figure out, like you were saying, SSDI is where they kind of want people to go to from SSI to SSDI. Like what qualifies? So when someone wants to apply for SSI or SSDI, who determines which category they fall in?
So it's always best to apply for both benefits, SSI and SSDI, just in case I mean, if you could call Social Security tomorrow and, give your name, social and everything. And they could say, and you could say, if I were to apply for disability benefits today, what's my estimated benefit amount? And they can tell you right then and there. And if it's $2,000, there's no point in applying for SSI, but for most people, it's not a bad idea, just in case they need both benefits. But so once you qualify for SSDI,
Yeah.
you lose those benefits. So there's a couple ways you can lose them by work. If with SSDI, and we didn't go over any of the work incentive that, like I said, that's a whole other training. But basically, when you first start, the first time you go to work on SSDI, you get a 9-month trial work period where you can earn as much as you want, and there's no impact on your benefit. After that, Social Security looks to see if your work is considered to be substantial or not. So there is a limit on how much you can earn. And if you're over that limit, then your benefits will be suspended initially. So and then you have a 3-year period where if your work is substantial, like if you're working full time during those 3 years. So let's say you complete your trial work period and your benefits are suspended, and you work full time for another year, and then you stop working, or you go back down to part-time and your work is no longer substantial. You don't have to reapply for benefits in that 3-year period. They're just suspended. You're not terminated. So that's one way. And the other main way is if Social Security determines that you have medically improved.
Okay. And this happens a lot with our individuals. Does your work schedule impact SSI, or is it just SSDI?
Oh yeah. Because
SSI
SSI is a welfare benefit. So they have a calculation where they use to determine how much SSI you can get. Now, with SSI, one thing I like about SSI is you can actually earn a little under $45,000, and you can stay eligible for SSI. Now, you're not going to be getting an SSI check, so you would be in non-pay status, but you would still be on SSI, and you keep your medical assistance. So if you stopped working, all you need to do is notify Social Security. Usually they want a letter from your employer with your last date of employment. You send that to your claims rep, and they'll reinstate your SSI benefit.
Good to know. The next question was from Sam. She's one of our individuals. She said, I recently started an online business, but I'm working on commission. So will that affect my SSI at all?
But where is this question? I see. Oh, for some reason, I'm not understanding any of this. But...
Same, Sam. There's a lot going on here.
Okay.
But right below that, I recently started an online business.
Okay. Is Sam still there?
Sam, are you here still? You can unmute yourself if you want.
I do have a couple questions.
She's here, so let's see if she has a chance to unmute.
Oh, she did it.
Hey guys.
Hi, Sam.
I don't. Oh, is that Sam?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Okay. So you started a business.
Yeah.
So you would be most likely considered self-employed by
Yep.
Social Security.
Excuse me. Can you turn that off for a sec? Okay. Now, sorry.
So, okay. So self-employment is so much more complicated than regular employment. With Social Security, there's a lot more documentation you need. For self-employment, you have to get benefits counseling. It's too complicated, and you are not going to get the information from Social Security. But I'm just wondering. I mean, are you making any money yet from your online business?
Not yet. I just started. So, but my father's here. Maybe he can explain it better than I can.
Is he with you? Well, this is something you must get benefits counseling for, because it is so much more complicated than regular employment, because Social Security, they have a lot of rules similar to the IRS, and you must work with an accountant as well. And you have to get, your self-employment taxes done, and you got to give them to Social Security every year. But they don't look at income the same way. They look at your net earnings from self-employment, which is not the same as your gross wages. So business expenses get, like, let's say you made $1,000 in profit in 1 month, and you had, $400 in countable business expenses. So you subtract that, and then there's an employer's tax. So there's another calculation involved that slightly reduces your countable income, because you're paying both parts of the employer tax. Whereas if you worked at a regular job, your employer would be paying part of that. So, and with this, you really have to get your taxes completed by an attorney, because Social Security is not going to go over all your receipts and determine how much you make. You need to present that to them, and then when they determine what your net earnings are from self-employment, then you get into how it would impact your SSI based on how much you're earning. But they also have a work incentive where normally for SSI, if you have assets, that's going to make you ineligible for SSI, but they have a work incentive that protects your business assets, so they're not counted as a resource for you individually. So I would really recommend getting intensive benefits counseling before you really start this, because you have to keep track of everything. You have to keep track of every receipt. You have to work with an accountant. You've got to pay quarterly taxes if you earn enough. But Social Security even says you've got to work with an accountant if you're going to do self-employment. So, and for self-employment for SSI is even more difficult than for people on SSDI, because of the welfare aspect of SSI. So it is very complicated. And if you're not working with DOORS, I would suggest that you contact the WIPA project and see if you can get benefits counseling, self-employment benefits counseling from them. But this is not something you want to do without consulting with a benefits counselor. And now sounds like the perfect time to do that while you're setting up the business.
Okay.
Sam, I'll make sure that information gets passed along to you about WIPA, and I'll make sure a staff person connects with you.
Okay.
Yeah, because
So I know it all sounds confusing here, but don't worry. I'll follow up. I have your contact.
You will have somebody to help you break it down for you.
yeah,
But you don't want to do this without support.
Absolutely. And then I think the last one from the chat box is from Caitlin. Can someone apply for DOORS just to get benefits counseling? And I think I know the answer, and it's no.
No.
Because I had that same exact thought, Caitlin. Because of the conundrum that we're in, since we do support so many people.
Yeah, it's so
DBA funded,
important.
Now I think maybe there's been a couple times, and it kind of might depend on the DOORS counselor, but somebody started working and they're running into all kinds of problems, so I can't say it's a never ever going to happen, but in the majority, because DOORS' job is to get you a job, and if you already have a job,
yeah, and people that are already working with Abilities Network, they might not have DOORS services. So
yeah.
The question is, I guess, how would they get benefits counseling? I guess other than that WIPA program, is there any other?
No, so it's either DOORS or or WIPA.
Mm.
And I wish I could give you more information on WIPA. I just don't know. I was asked to work on the WIPA project, but it's too much like working for Social Security for my taste. So from what I understand, it's very different than how we operate as benefits counselors through doors, because you have to use Social Security software. You have to. It's much more rigid. Um, but I do know some of the benefits counselors who work on the WIPA project, and they're very good at their jobs. I just don't, I just don't know enough about the program to do anything except refer you to it.
Well, maybe one day we can get DDA to have benefits counseling as a service that people
Well,
will be eligible for.
I don't know if you know this, but years ago, DDA had a pilot project for benefits counseling, and I participated in that. And they approved it. They loved it. And they just never added it to the service. They said they were going to.
Wow.
They never did. This was, maybe about 8 years ago. And they approved it, but it never got in as a optional waiver service for some reason. They said they were going to do it, and I mean, you know how DDA can be times, but that would be really great, because I have had a lot of cases where it would be enormously helpful because somebody's not working with doors, but they are working with DDA. And if DDA had followed through on that, they could have gotten, easily, it could have been part of their plan.
Yeah, it's pretty essential. I'm surprised it's.
It's
I agree, Kaylin.
it's
I
really
agree.
mandatory, if you're working, because there are also benefits that, for a perfect example is, if you're on SSDI and you only have Medicare, if you work, you can get medical assistance through the state, through the Employed Individuals with Disabilities program. So most people don't know about that, unless somebody tells them. And I usually do a couple applications a month, because when I tell people on SSDI and Medicare, you can get medical assistance when you work, that they're like, I need a job tomorrow, and the second they get a job, they're like, okay, can we do the medical assistance application? Because it saves you, just in the Part B premiums, that's over $1,200 a year, just that. And, if, as long as your doctors take both, you're not going to have to pay any copays. Medicare has that 80%, the co-insurance, where they only pay 80% of a lot of services. You've got to pay the other 20%. I just got a call last week from a client who can't afford an MRI, her portion of the MRI, because it's with Medicare, it's like $150, and she needs it. And the only way she can get that paid for is by getting a job and getting medical assistance. And it's so, I hate not being able to give somebody another answer, a better answer, but, her health is suffering, and she doesn't have the money to pay for it. So it really, that really is a shame, because there are a lot of people, who don't make a lot of money on disability, but they're maybe $100 over the limit for all these assistance programs. So they're not getting anything. They're not getting any help. And it's really a shame. It's really a shame. But for most people on Medicare, EID is really your best bet, unless you have a waiver, or, some people can get Medicaid for families, if they've got minor children, but the majority of people, it's EID or nothing for medical assistance.
The next question is, this was actually also emailed in from the Gellers, so you should have a copy of this. It refers to, it says, we also have a question we would like to ask. Is it more beneficial to classify a disabled adult as a dependent on our taxes or as an independent? We were told that if They are independent on taxes and they qualify for more state and federal programs. Is this true, or should we continue to classify him as a dependent on our taxes?
So that is true. There are benefits that you have to, you can't be a dependent. Like for example, if you're qualified, if you're applying for, if you're on Medicare and you're applying for Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act, if you are listed as a dependent, they're going to look at your parents' income and you're most likely not going to be eligible, versus if you are not a dependent and you get $1,100 a month in SSDI, you're going to get medical assistance. The earned income tax credit is another one. You don't have to have children to get the earned income tax credit. Now it's a lot smaller if you don't have children, but if you are a dependent, you can't get that. So what I always recommend, because I'm not an accountant, is a lot of accountants can kind of say, look, if you claim your adult child, this is what you're going to save. So it's really looking at, what benefits does my child need? And does this benefit, can they not get this benefit as a dependent? So like in that medical assistance example I gave you, if they don't have any insurance at all and they, their medication costs $2,000 a month out of pocket, yeah, you don't want them to be you don't want them to be a dependent. So it's really a case by case basis. In some cases, it's not going to make a difference at all. And you're going to save a lot more money by claiming your adult child as a dependent, but it really depends on what other benefits they might need. So it's really a case by case basis. And what the needs are of your adult child. So I can't give you one specific answer because it can go either way. But if it's keeping them from insurance, that's a huge consideration. So I would say in that situation, if they're not going to have any insurance and they're disabled and they need doctor's appointments and medications, it's not worth filing them as a dependent.
And then I think now we're going to move on to the other questions that were emailed in. You
Yes.
have this printed out, yeah?
Okay. So I have a 55-year-old daughter living with me. She has a learning disability and is classified as disabled by the state of Maryland. She is unemployed. Would she qualify for, this SSDI disability or SSI as a disabled adult? Thanks. Okay. Is anybody here who wrote that question? So that person didn't come?
It might take them a minute to unmute if they are here. I'm not positive. If you want to move on to the next question, we can.
Yeah, because I'm just checking the time. And if they're not there, there's no point in, because this is a rather complicated question. And if you do find out who asked this question, and they want, you want to email me and I can get a little more information, I can certainly do that. Okay, so we just talked about the taxes. Okay, if a disabled person has had their SSI stopped, how does he apply for reinstatement? Okay, that's a very good question. Now there's SSI benefits being suspended, which we had talked about. They have a work incentive called 1619B, and that's just the code they put in the system saying that somebody is still an SSI recipient, but they're not getting a cash payment because their income is too high. So in that case, if they stop working their benefits, their SSI is just suspended because they're earning too much money. They're still on SSI. And if they stop working, they would just notify Social Security and it would take about 2 months for the SSI to get reinstated. Now, if somebody loses their SSI eligibility, because they're earning, let's say they were earning $50,000 a year, or they got an inheritance of $10,000 and just keep it in their bank and don't, put it in an ABLE account or anything. In that case, you have 12 months to get back to where you're eligible again for SSI, and you don't have to reapply. You would just say, okay, I don't have $10,000 anymore, or I'm no longer earning $50,000 a year. So in 12 months, you don't have to reapply. You just have to provide the documentation. But if it's been over 12 months, now then you would have to reapply. And if they lost their benefits because of earned income, there is a work incentive for SSI and Title II benefits. It's called an expedited reinstatement. And you have 5 years from whatever point your benefits are terminated, where if you need to get back on disability, instead of starting all over from scratch, they have an application. It's expedited, hence the name. So Social Security will process that application more quickly, and they will pay you benefits, your previous benefits, for up to 6 months while they're reviewing your application. And if for some reason they did not reapprove you, you would not have to pay those provisional benefits back. But they would also, I would say anecdotally, I've had many clients do an expedited reinstatement, and the vast majority of them get reapproved. Now, I can't say, I don't know what the specific numbers are, but it's very common. And certain disabilities, like if you're blind, that's pretty much an automatic, you're automatically approved. But so if you did get reapproved, let's say you weren't getting benefits for 3 years and you were working full time. So Social Security would then take a look at your earnings and they would increase your benefit amount, and you might switch from SSI to, $1,500 a month in SSDI. So your provisional benefits would be what you were getting before, but once you were reapproved, you're going to get more money, almost certainly. And it generally takes about a month or 2 months tops for once you do the application for you to start getting a check. And, you should get an answer in the time frame that you're going to get the benefits for 6 months. But if they deny you, you can always still go through the appeal process. But that's what you do, to get back on benefits.
I was going to ask, that $2,000 asset limit, how often, people are getting stimulus checks and they might go over that $2,000?
They're good. I think.
How often do they check? Do they check
I
that?
think you have 12 months to spend that down. Under $2,000. So it is not affecting their SSI payments or their asset limit. So it would be a disaster if it did, because everybody on SSI and SSDI, everybody's entitled to that. So no, they don't penalize you. And I believe it's 12 months. You have to spend it down to below 2,000. And for people who have ABLE accounts, if they don't necessarily need that money, that's a, perfect way to save it without spending it if they don't need to. Was that pretty much?
Yeah, I was just going to say, at any given time, I feel like people go over that $2,000 and they're so scared that they then would lose. And I'm like, does SSI know when people go over that?
Oh, they'll find out eventually, because they can access your bank account. They have your bank account information. So they might not find out for a couple years, but they do, SSI does do, they do redeterminations where
Mhm.
they meet with you, they schedule an appointment, and they're going to check how much money you have. They're going to check how much money you have in the bank. And fortunately, if you go over, if you've got $3,000 in the bank for 2 months,
Mhm.
you're going to have to pay your SSI benefits back for those 2 months, but they're not going to make you pay anything that Medicaid covered. They're not going to make you pay that back, fortunately. So it's really mainly just the SSI checks.
Okay.
So they can find out at any time. Somebody may never really look into it. They might look into it 3 or 4 years down the road, but assume they're gonna know. So really, for anybody who can open an ABLE account, even just to get it started, because I think you can put as little as $25 in to open one. So even if it's something, it might be helpful down the road, just having that already set up, for situations where you might unexpectedly come into money other than the stimulus checks. But it's good to have that set up, because you can still take that money out when you need to. It just doesn't count for any benefits
Mhm.
out there. No program looks at ABLE. So, and especially for SSI, it's the best thing to happen to SSI recipients.
And for anyone that doesn't,
Forever.
isn't, and for anyone not familiar with ABLE, we do have a presentation from Maryland ABLE on our YouTube, so you guys can go back and rewatch that to become more familiar with what those are. Yeah, I think there were 2 other parts to that question, and the person that did send in those questions is here as well. That I think that's Mr. Barnes.
The first question.
The ones that
that-
you're currently answering, the
Okay,
3-part question.
if the disabled person has been mentally disabled since birth, what current documentation is required? Does a test have to be taken? How is it? Is this for applying for disability? I'm assuming this.
It sounds like it.
Okay, so I mean, depending on their age, normally if you want to apply, at 18, your parents' income no longer affects you. So, many people don't qualify for SSI as a child, but they do as an adult. So at that age, your IEPs from school, any psychological testing, any intellectual testing that the school has done, any information from doctors, that's what they're looking for. And if Social Security does not feel like they have enough information, they will send you to one of their own doctors, which you kind of want to try to avoid at all costs. Because I've, just from what I've heard, I've had people say, I had a 20-minute appointment with this psychologist. What are they going to learn in 20 minutes? And, and these people are contracted by Social Security. They're supposed to be neutral, but over the years, there's been some situations where I've doubted that they're really neutral. So my best advice is to get as much documentation on your own from your child's own doctors. Especially if they've had, if they've seen the same pediatrician their whole life, that doctor is going to have a wealth of information. But what they're looking for is, as an adult, is, does your disability prevent you from doing substantial work? So somebody, in their cases, you can be blind and a quadriplegic. And if you're earning $200,000 a year, Social Security doesn't consider you disabled. So that work component is huge for adults. Now, for kids, it's easier to get approved because they don't have the work requirement, but it all depends on what the parent's income is, because they look at the parent's income as well too. So some, some children lose their SSI as an adult because they don't meet the qualifications anymore, but some adults then qualify because the parent's income is no longer an issue. But really, you should be saving IEPs, you should be saving every psychological, the schools should be doing assessments. If you happen to work with doors will do assessments, doors will give information to Social Security. But you want to really try to avoid having them send you to a doctor. So whatever, and the key thing is, Social Security is looking for doctors to say, does this person's disability prevent them from doing any substantial work? So you really want to talk to your doctors and say, if you believe this is the case, can you state, I do not believe that this person is able to do any type of meaningful work for at least a year. That, if there's one thing that they're looking for from medical providers, it's that. So, I do occasionally help people apply, just like friends, family. And that's what I always stress, don't even bother sending this until you get, because you're going to get denied with, I'll look at what they have, and there's nothing about work on there, and that's primarily what Social Security is interested in. So have a talk with the doctors, have a talk with the therapist, and they want to document, I don't believe this person is capable of doing any substantial work for a minimum of 12 months. That's the number one thing I would say you need to get.
So I think we are slightly over time here.
Yeah. There was just one more
7:35.
question about the COVID.
I think they were just asking where to go. Do we go straight to the office? Is that an
No.
online process?
So you need to call. You need to call your local office. Social Security can do appointments online. I mean, you can do an appointment online, or you can do an appointment over the phone, if you're applying for benefits. But I've been, they're working from home. So, they're actually giving out their local numbers instead of just the call center, which you never want to call. You always want to call your local office. And they're using some kind of e-fax system. So, what I do is, if I'm reporting somebody's wages, I get the name of their claims rep, I send the pay stubs, I send it to that person, and then it gets to them in the system. So really everything is being done by phone.
Okay. So like I said, that brings us to, I'm going to stop recording now.